Tonight, allow your thoughts to become slow and unhurried as we wander through the peaceful vineyards of ancient Greece. Leave behind the noise of the day and settle into a quieter rhythm, where gentle breezes move among vines, temples rest beneath distant hills, and every season unfolds with calm patience. Together we will follow the quiet traditions surrounding Dionysus, discovering a world of harvest, nature, celebration, and restful silence. Long before vineyards covered gentle hills, the story of Dionysus began in quiet mystery. His mother was Semele, a mortal princess of Thebes, whose life briefly touched the brilliance of Zeus. Ancient poets remembered this beginning with calm reverence, not as a tale of triumph, but as one of change carried by destiny. The earth continued its steady seasons, while distant mountains held their silence. Rivers flowed without haste, olive trees swayed beneath mild breezes, and the familiar rhythm of Greece remained undisturbed, even as a child connected to both heaven and earth prepared to enter the world. Zeus often appeared to mortals in gentle disguises, allowing divine presence to remain soft beside human life. His affection for Semele became part of the larger fabric of myth, woven among stories that explained both joy and sorrow. Ancient storytellers did not rush through these moments. They lingered beside shaded groves, where birds called from cypress branches and warm sunlight rested upon worn stone paths. The beginning of Dionysus belonged to this peaceful landscape, where every breeze seemed to carry both promise and patience through the quiet countryside. Yet the lives of the gods often unfolded according to powers greater than mortal expectation. Hera, queen of Olympus, watched events with careful attention, as many ancient myths describe. Through divine influence, Semele asked to see Zeus revealed in his full heavenly form. The request was not born from malice in her own heart, but from persuasion shaped by forces beyond ordinary understanding. Around her, the hills remained green, shepherds guided distant flocks, and the slow passage of the seasons continued without interruption. No mortal could fully endure the unveiled brilliance of the king of the gods. Ancient poets described Zeus surrounded by lightning, radiant light, and the power of the sky itself. When Semele beheld that divine presence, her earthly life came quietly to its end. Rather than dwelling upon loss, many traditions turned their attention toward what endured. Even after sorrow, the earth continued to bloom. Wildflowers opened beside rocky paths, gentle streams reflected the morning sky, and life slowly moved forward in its familiar rhythm. Before all hope could disappear, Zeus rescued the unborn child. Ancient mythology tells that he carefully placed the infant within his own thigh, where the child could safely continue to grow until the proper time arrived. This unusual image became one of the most distinctive symbols surrounding Dionysus. It spoke not of haste, but of protection, patience, and preservation. Like seeds resting beneath winter soil, hidden life quietly prepared itself, while the visible world carried on through peaceful days and silent nights. As time passed, the hidden child remained secure beneath the care of Zeus. The mountains of Greece witnessed changing light from dawn until evening, while rivers followed ancient courses carved across the land. Nothing in nature hurried this remarkable birth. The quiet persistence of growth reflected the steady unfolding of every season. Just as vines slowly extend along rough stone walls, Dionysus waited with calm certainty until his second birth could arrive in its own gentle moment. When the time was complete, Dionysus emerged safely into the world. Ancient writers sometimes called him the twice-born god because his life passed through two remarkable beginnings. The title carried deep symbolic meaning, suggesting renewal after hardship and life continuing through unexpected paths. Rather than presenting the moment with great celebration, Many later artists imagined peaceful landscapes welcoming the child. Quiet forests, shaded valleys, and cool springs formed a fitting home for a deity whose gifts would one day be closely tied to the changing seasons. The newborn god could not remain openly upon Olympus, where old rivalries still lingered. Zeus therefore entrusted his care to faithful guardians, allowing the child to grow away from danger. Ancient myths describe secluded places where forests muffled every sound except birdsong and flowing water. Hidden valleys became gentle shelters where divine childhood unfolded slowly. The peaceful distance from crowded cities reflected the calm beginning that would always remain part of Dionysus, despite the lively celebrations later associated with his name. Among the gentle caretakers remembered in Greek tradition were the nymphs, spirits connected with forests, springs, and mountains. Their quiet presence suited the peaceful childhood of Dionysus. They belonged to places where clear water gathered among smooth stones and tall trees filtered soft sunlight across the ground. Ancient audiences would have recognized these landscapes as reminders that nature itself offered comfort and renewal. In such surroundings, the young god matured with the slow confidence found throughout the natural world. Some traditions also remembered wise Silenus as an early companion and guardian. Though later stories often portrayed him with humor and age, he also represented patient knowledge gathered through many years. His presence beside Dionysus connected youthful growth with quiet experience. Greek myths frequently balanced youth and wisdom in this way, allowing one generation to guide another. Like old olive trees standing beside new shoots, both strength and gentleness existed together beneath the broad sky of ancient Greece. Even before Dionysus became known for vines and festivals, his earliest story remained closely tied to the rhythms of life returning after difficulty. Ancient listeners understood agriculture well enough to recognize this pattern. Seeds disappear before they emerge. Winter yields slowly to spring. Bare branches quietly produce fresh leaves once more. The twice-born child reflected these familiar cycles, making his story feel deeply connected to the everyday experiences of farmers, shepherds, and travelers across the Greek countryside. The myths surrounding Dionysus rarely separated humanity from the wider landscape. Mountains, forests, rivers, and vineyards appeared not merely as settings, but as companions to every chapter of his life. His birth belonged to this larger harmony. While divine events unfolded beyond ordinary understanding, the land itself remained calm and welcoming. Gentle breezes crossed quiet fields, cicadas sang beneath warm afternoons, and distant hills rested beneath changing clouds exactly as they had for countless generations. Ancient worshippers remembered Dionysus not only as a god of celebration, but also as a symbol of renewal carried patiently through time. His unusual birth reminded them that life could continue after unexpected sorrow. Without loud declarations, the myth offered quiet reassurance through familiar images of growing vines, changing seasons, and returning harvests. Every cluster of grapes and every fresh spring leaf reflected the same gentle truth that careful growth often follows periods of waiting beneath the peaceful sky. As the story of Dionysus quietly begins, the land of Greece seems to breathe with steady calm. Hills remain unchanged, temples rest among olive groves, and distant seas reflect the soft colors of evening. The child who entered the world through such extraordinary circumstances carries within him the enduring rhythm of nature itself. His birth is remembered not as a sudden interruption, but as another peaceful turning in the endless cycle of growth, rest, renewal, and the gentle passing of the seasons. As the years passed, Dionysus spent much of his youth among quiet mountains, shaded forests, and broad green valleys. Ancient storytellers often placed him far from crowded cities, where gentle breezes carried the scent of pine, herbs, and wild flowers. In these peaceful places, every season revealed its own quiet rhythm. Spring awakened fresh leaves, summer ripened fruit beneath warm sunlight, autumn filled the hills with deep colors, and winter wrapped the landscape in calm stillness. Surrounded by changing nature, the young god came to reflect the steady cycles that shaped both the land and the lives of those who depended upon it. The forests were more than places of shelter. They offered silence, shade, and the steady sound of wind moving through branches. Ancient Greeks regarded many groves as sacred, believing that divine presence rested gently among ancient trees. Dionysus was often imagined wandering these peaceful woods without haste, observing birds, streams, and quiet clearings. Rather than ruling the wilderness from above, he belonged within it, moving as naturally as sunlight passing between leaves and as softly as the flowing water that crossed the forest floor. The mountains surrounding his wandering paths rose with quiet dignity into the clear sky. Their rocky slopes reminded the ancient Greeks of places where gods and mortals could draw close without disturbing one another. Cool air drifted across high meadows, while distant peaks caught the first light of dawn and the final glow of evening. Dionysus grew familiar with these peaceful heights, where every sunrise seemed unhurried, and every sunset settled gently over the valleys below, marking another calm turning of the seasons. Streams winding through the hills became faithful companions during these quiet journeys. Their clear waters reflected passing clouds and carried fallen leaves toward distant rivers. In Greek thought, flowing water often symbolized renewal and the gentle movement of time. Dionysus was remembered beside springs and brooks where the sound of water blended with birdsong. Nothing hurried these moments. The landscape itself invited patience, showing that growth often arrived quietly, one season following another with steady and dependable grace. Wild vines slowly climbed over rocks, wrapped themselves around trees, and reached patiently toward sunlight. They grew without noise or urgency, following the quiet order already present in nature. Dionysus became closely connected with these vines, not because they appeared suddenly, but because they reflected slow and faithful growth. Every curling branch, every fresh leaf, and every small cluster of fruit carried the lesson that abundance often begins with simple, unnoticed changes repeated across many peaceful days. The valleys welcomed changing weather with remarkable calm. Gentle rain nourished fields without haste, while soft sunlight returned to warm the earth again. Ancient farmers depended upon these dependable patterns, knowing that every harvest required time and careful patience. Dionysus became linked with these quiet cycles rather than sudden miracles. His presence reflected the generous rhythm of nature itself, where growth unfolded gradually, and every season offered its own quiet gift before gently making way for the next. Birds crossed the open sky without disturbing the stillness below. Deer stepped lightly through shaded woods, while small animals disappeared among grasses and fallen leaves. Ancient stories often surrounded Dionysus with living creatures that shared the peaceful landscapes he visited. These animals belonged naturally to the forests and hills, reminding listeners that the world of the gods was not separated from nature, but quietly woven into it, wherever life continued with calm balance and gentle purpose. Morning mist often rested over the valleys before the rising sun slowly lifted it away. The changing light transformed familiar hills into new scenes each day without altering their quiet character. Dionysus was imagined experiencing these gentle beginnings many times, learning from landscapes that never rushed their own beauty. The ancient world measured time not only by calendars, but also by sunrise, harvest, rainfall, and the steady return of familiar seasons across the same welcoming countryside. As vineyards gradually became part of Greek life, Dionysus naturally came to represent their patient care. Vines demanded years before offering their richest fruit, teaching that lasting abundance could not be forced. This quiet relationship between people and the land reflected values deeply respected throughout the countryside. Farmers watched the changing skies, tended each plant carefully, and trusted the slow passage of seasons. Dionysus embodied this enduring partnership between human effort and the generous rhythms of nature. Evening brought long shadows across hillsides as warm colors settled over forests and fields. Birds returned to their resting places, while cool air drifted quietly through the valleys. Dionysus belonged comfortably within these peaceful endings of the day. Ancient storytellers often allowed silence to surround such moments, suggesting that the world itself rested before another sunrise. The quiet close of daylight became as meaningful as its beginning, completing another gentle circle within the endless rhythm of nature. The changing seasons shaped every corner of the landscape. Fresh blossoms appeared, leaves deepened into green, grapes slowly ripened, and branches eventually rested bare beneath winter skies. Dionysus reflected this natural sequence rather than resisting it. Ancient mythology often embraced these repeating patterns, recognizing that endings quietly prepared the way for new beginnings. The peaceful acceptance of change became one of the lasting qualities associated with the gentle god of vines and fertile growth. Quiet caves scattered through the mountains offered cool shelter from summer heat and gentle refuge during passing storms. Such places held an important place within Greek imagination, serving as peaceful spaces connected with divine stories and natural wonder. Dionysus was sometimes associated with these hidden places, where echoes faded softly into stone. Within their calm darkness, the steady sounds of dripping water and distant wind reminded listeners that the earth itself possessed a slow and comforting rhythm. The landscapes through which Dionysus wandered were never separate from the people who lived nearby. Shepherds guided their flocks, farmers cared for fields, and travelers followed winding roads between villages. Although myths often focused on the gods, they also reflected ordinary life shaped by the land itself. Dionysus grew into a figure who understood both nature and those who relied upon it, bringing together quiet hillsides, fruitful vineyards, and the peaceful work that sustained everyday communities. By the time Dionysus reached maturity, the mountains, forests, and valleys had become more than places he visited. They formed the quiet foundation of his character and his enduring connection with the living world. Ancient Greeks remembered him as a god whose strength was closely tied to steady growth, generous harvests, and the peaceful renewal found in every returning season. Across the gentle landscapes of Greece, nature itself became his lasting companion, offering calm beauty that quietly endured through every passing year. Long before vineyards covered gentle hillsides, Dionysus was remembered as carrying the knowledge of the vine from place to place. Ancient stories describe him wandering through distant valleys and quiet islands, offering a gift that asked for patience instead of haste. A vine could not reward anyone in a single day. It needed careful planting, steady sunlight, gentle rain, and many peaceful seasons before its branches became strong enough to bear fruit. The slow rhythm of growing grapes quietly matched the measured pace of nature itself, where lasting things appeared only after generous amounts of time. The first vineyards were never imagined as endless fields. They began with only a few vines placed into welcoming soil. Farmers loosened the earth with simple wooden tools and watched each tender stem settle into its new home. Every morning brought only the smallest changes. Tiny leaves unfolded almost unnoticed, climbing patiently toward the warmth of the sun. The quiet work of tending these young plants became part of everyday life, reminding each village that nature preferred calm repetition over hurried effort. In Greek tradition, Dionysus was more than the god of wine. He also represented the mysterious cycle of growth, rest, and renewal that appeared throughout the natural world. The vineyard reflected these gentle lessons perfectly. Spring awakened sleeping roots. Summer strengthened leaves beneath bright skies. Autumn offered ripe clusters, while winter allowed every branch to rest in silence. Each season carried equal importance, and none could be hurried without disturbing the balance that nature quietly preserved. Ancient growers learned that vines preferred hillsides where sunlight lingered through much of the day. The rocky ground, which seemed too difficult for many other crops, often welcomed grape roots with surprising kindness. Between scattered stones, the vines stretched downward in search of water, becoming stronger through steady effort. The landscape itself seemed to teach quiet endurance, rewarding patience with healthy growth over many peaceful years. The vine climbed slowly toward wooden stakes and carefully shaped supports. Left alone, its branches wandered freely across the ground, but gentle guidance helped each stem reach open air and warm light. This careful partnership between people and plants reflected a calm understanding rather than control. The gardener offered direction, while the vine followed its own quiet nature, growing at the pace chosen by the earth and the changing seasons. Morning dew often rested upon the broad leaves before the first sunlight warmed the vineyard. Tiny drops reflected the pale sky for only a short while before quietly disappearing into the day's warmth. Such ordinary moments rarely entered great legends, yet they filled the daily life of ancient vineyards. The gentle beauty of these passing scenes reminded people that nature offered countless peaceful gifts without asking for attention or celebration. Birdsong accompanied many quiet mornings among the vines. Small birds perched upon nearby branches before continuing their gentle journeys across fields and olive groves. The vineyard belonged not only to people, but also to countless living creatures that shared the same landscape. Dionysus, whose stories often celebrated harmony between humanity and nature, was remembered as a guardian of these living rhythms rather than their master. As years passed, each vine thickened into a sturdy trunk with twisting branches shaped by time itself. No two plants followed exactly the same path. Some leaned gently toward the morning sun, while others curved around stones that had rested beneath the soil for centuries. Their quiet individuality became part of the vineyard's beauty, showing that steady growth rarely followed perfectly straight lines. When grapes finally appeared, they emerged as small green clusters hidden beneath wide leaves. Weeks passed before they slowly deepened into richer shades, gathering sweetness with every warm afternoon and every cool evening. Nothing in the vineyard happened suddenly. Even the harvest waited until the fruit had quietly completed its own natural journey toward fullness. Ancient storytellers often described Dionysus bringing joy, yet his gifts began with remarkable patience. Before celebration came careful planting. Before wine came many peaceful harvests. Before abundance came years of faithful tending. The vineyard gently revealed that delight often grows from steady work performed without hurry, following the calm rhythm established by nature itself. The quiet shade beneath vineyard leaves became a welcome resting place during warm afternoons. Gentle breezes moved softly through the rows, carrying the faint scent of earth, herbs, and growing fruit. Nothing demanded attention there. Even time seemed to move more slowly, measured by drifting clouds and the gradual turning of sunlight across the hillside. The knowledge of caring for vines gradually traveled from one community to another. Families passed simple techniques through peaceful conversation and careful observation rather than written books alone. Each generation added its own quiet experience while honoring the lessons learned before them. In this way, vineyards became living memories rooted both in the land and in the patient traditions of those who tended them. Even after the harvest ended, the vineyard never truly slept forever. Bare branches rested through winter, gathering quiet strength beneath the cool air. Though the landscape appeared still, life remained hidden within every vine. Ancient Greeks understood that apparent silence often protected future growth, allowing another peaceful spring to arrive in its own perfect season. So the first vineyards became more than places where grapes were grown. They reflected a gentle partnership between earth, weather, time, and careful hands. Dionysus remained connected to these peaceful landscapes because they embodied slow transformation rather than sudden change. Each vine quietly reminded those who walked among its branches that nature's greatest gifts often arrived one calm season after another, unfolding with steady grace across the years. As summer slowly softened into early autumn, the hills of Greece carried clusters of ripe grapes that had gathered sweetness beneath many calm mornings. The season of harvest arrived without haste. In stories connected with Dionysus, the vine reminded people that patient care often brought quiet rewards. Each year followed the familiar pattern of growth, fruit, rest, and renewal, encouraging communities to notice the gentle rhythm already present in the land. The changing light, the cooling air, and the steady ripening of the vineyards became peaceful signs that another cycle had reached its graceful conclusion. Dionysus was honored as the divine guardian of the vine, yet his gifts were understood to begin long before the first cup of wine. The growing plant itself reflected quiet endurance. Through winter roots rested unseen, spring awakened tender leaves, summer filled the branches with fruit, and autumn invited careful gathering. Ancient poets often recognized these repeating seasons as part of nature's dependable order. Rather than rushing toward abundance, the vineyard revealed that every harvest was shaped by many peaceful months of unseen preparation beneath the changing sky. The harvest itself unfolded at an unhurried pace. Baskets were filled little by little, allowing the vineyard to offer its fruit with calm generosity. Every vine was approached with care, since healthy branches would continue their quiet work in years yet to come. The landscape remained filled with the soft sounds of wind moving through leaves and distant birds crossing open skies. Even during the busiest days, the ancient fields suggested steadiness rather than urgency, inviting attention to each simple movement among the vines. Greek traditions connected Dionysus with joyful festivals, yet the vineyard also held moments of remarkable stillness. Dawn often arrived before the warmth of the day, covering leaves with cool moisture that reflected the first gentle light. In those quiet hours, the grapes seemed almost untouched by time. The calm before the day's work became part of the harvest itself, reminding people that silence and celebration could exist within the same sacred season without diminishing one another. Ancient winemaking began with simple methods passed from one generation to the next. Grapes were gathered carefully before their juice slowly found its way into jars prepared for fermentation. Knowledge grew through observation rather than haste, shaped by countless seasons beneath familiar skies. Dionysus was remembered not only as a divine figure of celebration, but also as a symbol of transformation, showing how ordinary fruit could patiently become something entirely new through the quiet passage of time. The broad countryside surrounding the vineyards remained deeply connected to the harvest. Olive trees, distant mountains and open fields shared the same changing seasons. Nothing stood apart from the rhythm that guided the vines. Rain, sunshine, cool evenings, and warm afternoons all played their gentle part. Dionysus belonged to this larger harmony of nature, where every living thing participated in cycles that continued faithfully from one year to the next without seeking attention. Artists sometimes portrayed Dionysus wearing a crown of vine leaves, a quiet reminder of his close bond with growing plants rather than royal power. Unlike crowns fashioned from precious metals, living leaves changed with the seasons, reflecting nature itself. Fresh in spring, full in summer, and fading gently in autumn, they carried no permanence. Their beauty rested in accepting change, just as the vineyard welcomed each season without resisting the steady passage of time. The amphorae that stored new wine became familiar companions within homes and sanctuaries throughout the Greek world. Their rounded shapes protected the harvest through the months ahead, preserving the work of the vineyard beyond autumn itself. Each vessel quietly represented patience, because its contents improved gradually rather than immediately. Dionysus was therefore associated not only with abundance, but with waiting, allowing time to complete what careful hands had gently begun. As evening settled across the vineyards, long shadows stretched gently between the rows of vines. The warmth of the afternoon slowly faded into cooler air, and the hills became wrapped in peaceful silence. Such evenings offered a natural pause after the day's gathering. The harvest did not demand constant motion. Instead, it followed the calm rhythm of daylight itself, resting whenever the sun slipped beyond the distant mountains and the first stars quietly appeared. Many hymns honoring Dionysus acknowledged the generosity of the earth without separating divine gifts from ordinary labor. Rain nourished the vines, sunlight ripened the fruit, and patient hands completed the cycle. None of these elements stood alone. Ancient stories often emphasized cooperation between nature, humanity, and the gods, presenting the harvest as a shared rhythm rather than a single achievement. This gentle balance gave the vineyard its lasting place within Greek tradition. The vine itself became a quiet teacher of resilience. After each harvest, its branches appeared bare, yet hidden life remained within them through the colder months. Spring would return, bringing fresh leaves exactly as countless seasons had done before. Dionysus reflected this dependable renewal, encouraging confidence in nature's patient cycles rather than fear of temporary endings. The vineyard never hurried toward its future, trusting the seasons to arrive in their proper time. Across the ancient countryside, vineyards connected villages separated by hills and valleys. Though each field had its own character, all followed the same familiar calendar shaped by weather and sunlight. Dionysus belonged equally to every quiet vineyard where the vine continued its steady work. His presence was remembered not through constant display, but through the dependable return of another harvest as each peaceful year completed its gentle circle. When the grapes had all been gathered, the landscape became noticeably quieter. Empty vines rested beneath the open heavens, while fields prepared for another season of gentle waiting. Nothing seemed unfinished. The harvest had simply reached its natural pause before winter's calm. Ancient Greece understood these resting moments as valuable parts of the cycle, reminding every observer that stillness could nourish the future just as surely as growth itself. The story of Dionysus and the vine ultimately follows the peaceful movement of the seasons rather than constant excitement. Every cluster of grapes began as a small blossom. Every harvest depended upon patient months, and every resting vineyard quietly prepared for renewal. The hills of Greece carried these gentle rhythms year after year, inviting calm attention to the dependable patterns of nature. Within that enduring cycle, the vine continued its silent conversation with the earth, the sunlight, and the passing seasons. As the seasons turned across ancient Greece, quiet festivals honored Dionysus with gratitude rather than haste. Villages prepared simple offerings of grapes, bread, olives, and fresh water before the first songs drifted into the open air. These gatherings marked the steady rhythm of the earth, reminding everyone that vines required patience through winter, gentle care in spring, warm sunlight in summer, and careful hands in autumn. In the oldest traditions, celebration was woven into the natural cycle itself, allowing joy to grow slowly, just as every cluster of grapes ripened beneath the calm sky. Small shrines dedicated to Dionysus often rested beside vineyards or gentle hillsides. Garlanded with ivy, they became peaceful places where travelers paused for a quiet moment before continuing along dusty roads. Rather than grand displays, many local observances were humble expressions of thanks for fertile fields and dependable harvests. The scent of herbs drifted through the breeze while distant birds crossed the pale morning light. The landscape itself seemed to participate in the festival, offering silence between every sound. The vine held special meaning because it rewarded careful attention over many years. Every branch was pruned with patience, every season accepted without complaint. Dionysus became associated with this slow unfolding of life, where abundance arrived only after long waiting. Ancient farmers understood that neither fruit nor wisdom could be hurried. Their quiet celebrations reflected this understanding, honoring the peaceful labor that transformed ordinary soil into generous harvests shared among neighbors and families. At certain festivals, wreaths woven from fresh ivy symbolized the enduring vitality of nature. Ivy remained green through changing seasons, making it a fitting companion for Dionysus. Unlike flowers that quickly faded, its leaves spoke of steady renewal. Resting against temple stones or hanging from wooden doors, these simple wreaths quietly reminded visitors that life continued through every winter and returned again with gentle certainty when spring awakened the hills. Music accompanied many sacred gatherings, yet it often began softly. The distant notes of a flute floated across fields while measured voices carried familiar hymns. Their purpose was not to overwhelm the senses, but to establish harmony between people, the land, and the divine. As the melodies rose and faded with the breeze, they blended naturally with rustling leaves and flowing streams, becoming another peaceful sound within the living landscape. The earliest wine offered during these observances was treated with respect. Mixed carefully with water according to Greek custom, it represented balance rather than excess. Shared in moderation, it became a symbol of friendship, hospitality, and gratitude for the patient work of countless seasons. Every cup reflected the journey from tiny vine to ripened fruit, from careful harvest to quiet celebration beneath the open heavens. Many festivals unfolded beneath broad skies without elaborate buildings surrounding them. Hills, olive groves, and vineyards provided natural gathering places where sunlight slowly shifted across the ground. Clouds drifted overhead without urgency, while gentle breezes carried the fragrance of earth and leaves. These familiar landscapes reminded participants that the blessings associated with Dionysus were inseparable from the quiet beauty of the countryside itself. Stories of Dionysus were spoken calmly from one generation to the next. Elders remembered ancient journeys, miraculous vines, and the generous gifts of fertile land. Children listened beneath the shade of trees while afternoon light softened into evening. These tales were preserved not through haste, but through repetition, allowing each telling to settle gently into memory like falling leaves upon still ground. As daylight faded, Oil lamps gradually replaced the warmth of the sun. Their steady flames illuminated temple courtyards and stone pathways without disturbing the surrounding darkness. The gentle glow invited peaceful reflection rather than excitement. Within this quiet light, gratitude for the harvest became inseparable from gratitude for another completed season, each ending naturally before another would begin. The stars above Greece formed an unchanging canopy familiar to countless generations. Farmers, sailors, poets, and priests all looked upward toward the same quiet constellations after festival days had ended. Beneath that immense sky, human celebrations appeared small yet meaningful. Dionysus remained connected not only to earthly abundance, but also to the comforting rhythm shared by heavens, seasons, and the enduring passage of time. Even after offerings had been completed, the vineyards remained silent companions. Their leaves continued moving gently with the evening breeze while moonlight settled across the rows of vines. Nothing hurried the coming harvest, and nothing disturbed the patient work already accomplished. Nature itself became the final hymn, expressing gratitude without spoken words through its steady and peaceful presence. Ancient playwrights also honored Dionysus during sacred festivals devoted to dramatic performances. Though the theaters could welcome many spectators, their purpose extended beyond entertainment. Stories explored courage, compassion, fate, and the fragile balance of human life. Between spoken verses, the surrounding hills echoed quietly, reminding every listener that thoughtful reflection was as valuable as celebration itself. The turning of another season always arrived without fanfare. New shoots appeared where bare branches had rested, and vineyards slowly awakened beneath warming sunlight. Dionysus represented this dependable renewal, not as sudden transformation, but as the patient return of life after quiet waiting. Every spring carried familiar hope because the earth faithfully remembered its ancient rhythms. When the final songs faded into silence, only the peaceful landscape remained. The hills stood unchanged, the temples rested beneath the stars, and the vines continued their slow journey toward another harvest. In that enduring stillness, the festivals of Dionysus became gentle reminders that joy could exist without hurry, growing naturally through gratitude, patience, and the quiet companionship of the changing seasons. Among the many plants connected with Dionysus, ivy was perhaps the quietest companion. Unlike vines that rested through winter, evergreen ivy remained green across changing seasons, gently climbing old stones and ancient trees. Greek poets saw in its steady leaves a symbol of enduring life and calm resilience. Wreaths of ivy were often associated with Dionysus, not as signs of conquest, but as reminders that nature continues its patient work through every season. Even when vineyards appeared bare beneath cool skies, the ivy still covered walls and trunks with soft green, suggesting quiet continuity rather than hurried growth. The grapevine offered another gentle lesson. Throughout much of the year, its branches appeared almost lifeless, their leaves long fallen to the earth. Yet hidden beneath rough bark, quiet strength remained. As spring returned, tiny buds slowly emerged without noise or celebration. Dionysus became closely linked with this peaceful cycle, representing not endless abundance, but the patient return of life after necessary rest. Farmers who cared for the vineyards understood that every fruitful harvest began with long months of waiting, careful pruning, and trust in the rhythm of the seasons. Pine trees also found a place among the symbols connected with Dionysus. Their tall trunks stood calmly through changing weather, while fragrant needles whispered softly whenever mountain breezes arrived. Pine cones often appeared upon ritual staffs known as theosoi, combining the steady strength of evergreen forests with the gentle vitality celebrated by the god. The pine itself did not hurry its growth. Year after year, it quietly reached higher, offering shade, fragrance, and shelter across the hillsides that overlooked vineyards and winding country paths. The thesis was one of Dionysus' most recognizable symbols. Rather than a weapon of iron, it was a simple staff wrapped with ivy or vine leaves and crowned by a pine cone. Ancient artists portrayed it as an emblem of natural vitality rather than military power. Constructed from ordinary materials gathered from forests and fields, it reflected a world where sacred meaning could be found in familiar plants. Even standing quietly beside a temple wall, the thesis suggested harmony between cultivated vineyards and untamed woodland. Clusters of grapes gradually ripened beneath the warm Mediterranean sun. Their colors shifted from pale green to deep purple or golden shades as summer slowly passed into autumn. This transformation happened little by little, almost unnoticed from one day to the next. Dionysus became associated with this gentle unfolding of abundance, where careful attention rewarded patient observation. Every vineyard revealed that nature preferred gradual change over sudden miracles, inviting quiet appreciation for processes that unfolded according to their own peaceful measure. Ancient Greek pottery often decorated Dionysus with curling vines that surrounded his figure like flowing patterns rather than rigid ornaments. These painted branches wound naturally across cups, jars, and mixing vessels, reflecting the graceful movements of living plants. The artists captured not only the harvest itself, but also the elegance of growth, showing leaves unfolding and tendrils gently reaching outward. Through these familiar designs, everyday objects quietly carried reminders of seasonal renewal into homes throughout the Greek world. In the countryside, vineyards and woodlands often existed side by side. Cultivated rows of vines ended where pine forests or rocky hills began, allowing both ordered fields and wild landscapes to share the same horizon. Dionysus belonged comfortably to both places. His symbols reminded people that careful farming and untamed nature were not opposites, but neighboring expressions of the same living earth. The peaceful meeting of vineyard and forest reflected balance instead of separation. Ivy climbed without haste. Its slender stems slowly found cracks in ancient stone, embracing walls, columns, and tree trunks over many years. Unlike flowering plants that bloomed briefly, ivy offered quiet constancy. Greek observers likely admired this enduring presence, seeing in its steady growth a calm persistence that required neither speed nor display. Its leaves remained familiar through changing weather, quietly softening the edges of buildings shaped by both nature and human hands. Autumn brought the careful gathering of grapes. Rather than rushing through the vineyards, harvesters often worked steadily beneath mild skies, carrying baskets filled with fruit that represented an entire year's patient labor. Dionysus became closely linked with this peaceful conclusion of the growing season. The harvest marked neither an ending nor a beginning alone, but one gentle step within an endless cycle where every completed season quietly prepared the next. Even after the grapes had been gathered, the vineyards remained beautiful. Bare branches stretched across wooden supports while soft winter light rested upon empty rows. The landscape invited stillness rather than sorrow. Ancient farmers understood that apparent emptiness often concealed future abundance. Dionysus, through the quiet symbolism of the vine, reflected confidence in renewal, without demanding constant activity or visible growth. Pine cones carried gentle symbolic meaning because they held many seeds within a simple, carefully ordered form. Their quiet geometry reflected nature's patient design. Placed atop the thesis, The pine cone reminded observers that lasting abundance often begins hidden inside modest things. No bright display announced its purpose. Instead, it quietly protected future forests within overlapping wooden scales until the proper season arrived. Across Greek hillsides, wild vines sometimes climbed freely among shrubs and trees, growing without cultivation. These untended plants stood beside carefully maintained vineyards, illustrating two different expressions of the same living species. Dionysus embraced both the cultivated and the wild, suggesting that beauty could appear through careful care or through nature's own quiet decisions. Together they formed a landscape where order and freedom existed side by side. Artists occasionally placed ivy crowns upon the heads of Dionysus instead of precious metal. Fresh leaves offered no lasting permanence, yet their living beauty reflected the changing world more faithfully than gold. Such crowns quietly honored the natural landscape itself. They reminded those who looked upon them that seasons, plants, and gentle cycles deserved as much respect as monuments built from stone. Together, the vine, the ivy, and the pine formed a peaceful collection of symbols that reflected the quiet character of the natural world. Each plant followed its own rhythm without haste, growing according to seasons older than memory. In the traditions surrounding Dionysus, these familiar companions encouraged careful observation of change, renewal, and steady life. Long after festivals ended and vineyards grew silent beneath evening skies, the plants themselves continued their calm work beneath the stars. As the seasons turned with patient certainty, the festivals of Dionysus offered another kind of harvest. Alongside vines and generous cups came stories spoken beneath the open sky. The god was honored not only with songs and dances, but with performances that invited quiet reflection. In these gatherings, people listened together as familiar tales unfolded at an unhurried pace. The theater became a peaceful place where memory, imagination, and tradition rested beside one another. Dionysus was remembered as the gentle patron of this shared art, where every voice joined a larger story without hurry or strain. The earliest performances grew from hymns called dithyrambs, sung in honor of Dionysus. Over many years, these songs slowly transformed, adding speakers, dialogue, and graceful movement. What began as a chorus gradually became the foundation of Greek drama. This change unfolded across generations rather than in a single moment, like vines slowly climbing a familiar hillside. Each new performance preserved something of the older songs, allowing ancient devotion and creative storytelling to rest comfortably beside one another beneath the calm light of the Mediterranean sun. Playwrights carefully shaped stories that explored courage, kindness, grief, hope, and forgiveness. Their characters often reflected the joys and burdens carried by ordinary people. Although gods sometimes appeared within the tales, the performances quietly encouraged reflection on human choices and shared experiences. Audiences recognized familiar emotions while sitting together beneath the wide sky. In this gentle way, the theater became a place where communities could consider life's changing seasons with patience instead of haste, honoring Dionysus through thoughtful storytelling rather than loud celebration alone. The festivals dedicated to Dionysus welcomed poets, musicians, actors, and citizens from many parts of Greece. Their journeys ended not in competition alone, but in a shared appreciation for stories carefully told. Performances unfolded across long daylight hours, allowing listeners to settle into a steady rhythm of words, silence, and thoughtful pauses. Even when the stories described difficult moments, they were framed within a larger sense of order, reminding everyone that change and renewal belonged naturally to both nature and human life. Ancient theaters were often built into gentle hillsides, where rows of stone seats overlooked both the stage and distant landscapes. The surrounding mountains, fields, and sea became quiet companions to every performance. Breezes carried each spoken line across the open air without walls to contain it. The setting itself reflected the harmony valued by Greek builders, joining architecture with the natural world. In such places, stories seemed to belong not only to those who spoke them, but also to the earth beneath their feet. Actors wore carefully crafted masks that helped express different characters and emotions. A single performer could become many individuals simply by changing the mask and voice. Rather than hiding identity, these masks invited audiences to imagine lives beyond their own. They became symbols of storytelling itself, reminding everyone that wisdom could arrive through many faces and many voices. Under the quiet protection of Dionysus, imagination was treated as a gentle companion to memory and tradition. Music quietly accompanied many performances. Simple melodies from the aulos and measured rhythms supported the spoken words without overwhelming them. The chorus moved together with calm precision, weaving song and speech into a single flowing experience. Their voices linked each scene with patience, offering reflection between moments of action. Just as vines connect branch to branch, the chorus gently connected every part of the story into one peaceful whole that honored Dionysus with grace and balance. The stories presented in these festivals were often already familiar. Tales of heroes, gods, and ancient families had been shared for generations before reaching the stage. Hearing them again brought comfort rather than surprise. Each retelling offered small differences while preserving the heart of the tradition. In this quiet repetition, Greek communities strengthened their shared memory, allowing old stories to remain living companions through changing years and changing seasons. Dionysus was known for inspiring transformation, yet this transformation was not always dramatic or sudden. Within the theater, change often arrived through understanding. A listener could leave with greater patience, compassion, or acceptance than before. Stories gently reshaped thoughts in the same way that slow rain nourishes a vineyard. Without force or urgency, they encouraged quiet growth that unfolded naturally over time, reflecting the steady rhythms found throughout the Greek countryside. Comedy also found its place within the festivals of Dionysus. Gentle laughter eased tired minds and reminded communities that joy belonged beside seriousness. Clever dialogue and playful imagination celebrated ordinary life without forgetting respect for the gods. Shared laughter became another peaceful gift, allowing neighbors to recognize common experiences with warmth and understanding. In this balance between reflection and delight, the theater mirrored the varied seasons of human life. Tragedy, too, held an important place. These stories explored sorrow with dignity rather than despair. They encouraged audiences to witness loss, loyalty, courage, and reconciliation with quiet attention. Instead of leaving hearts burdened, many listeners found a sense of calm acceptance. Difficult emotions were acknowledged gently and given space to settle. In honoring Dionysus, tragedy became another peaceful reminder that every season eventually gives way to another beneath the enduring sky. The theater brought together generations who might otherwise spend their days apart. Elders remembered familiar verses, while younger listeners discovered them for the first time. Shared attention created a quiet bond stronger than hurried conversation. Everyone listened to the same words carried by the same breeze across the same hillside. These simple moments strengthened communities through patience, memory, and careful listening, all offered beneath the generous presence of Dionysus. Long after each festival ended, the stories continued to travel. Travelers carried them across valleys, islands, and distant cities. Poets remembered them, families repeated them, and future playwrights reshaped them with respect for older traditions. Like seeds carried by gentle winds, these tales found new places to grow while keeping their ancient roots. Dionysus remained connected to this peaceful journey of storytelling, from one generation to the next. As evening settled softly over the stone theaters, silence slowly returned to the seats. The songs faded, the actors departed, and only the quiet landscape remained beneath the stars. Yet the stories lingered within every listener, resting as calmly as moonlight upon ancient marble. In this lasting stillness, Dionysus was remembered not only as the god of the vine, but also as the quiet guardian of shared stories, gentle reflection, and the enduring gift of human imagination. Dionysus was not only the god of the vine and joyful celebration, but also a quiet guardian of nature's patient rhythm. The vineyards did not remain full throughout the year. After generous harvests, the fields entered long periods of stillness. Ancient Greeks understood that even the richest soil required peaceful rest before offering new life again. They saw this gentle pattern as part of Dionysus' enduring presence, reminding every farmer that abundance arrived only after seasons of calm, silence, and waiting beneath the changing skies. As autumn slowly faded into winter, vines released their leaves and stood quietly against pale mornings. Their branches appeared empty, yet hidden within them rested the promise of another spring. Dionysus was never absent during these quiet months. His gifts simply became less visible, dwelling within roots deep beneath the earth where life moved slowly, unseen, but never forgotten by the patient land. The resting earth was deeply respected throughout ancient Greece. Farmers avoided demanding endless harvests from the same fields. They understood that the soil itself seemed to breathe, recovering strength during quiet intervals. This careful balance reflected the natural order that Dionysus represented, where generosity and restraint belonged together. Every pause allowed future abundance to emerge without haste or struggle. When the first warmth of spring returned, tiny green shoots slowly appeared upon the vines. Their arrival was never sudden. Each new leaf unfolded at its own gentle pace, encouraged by sunlight, rain, and the quiet turning of the seasons. Dionysus was honored not for forcing growth, but for guiding nature through its patient and reliable renewal year after year. The ancient festivals dedicated to Dionysus often followed these natural cycles rather than interrupting them. Celebrations arrived when the land itself seemed ready to share its gifts. Songs, offerings, and quiet gratitude reflected an understanding that every joyful gathering had first been prepared by countless peaceful days in fields, vineyards, and gentle hillsides, watched over by changing seasons. Summer brought long hours of warm light across the vineyards. Grapes slowly gathered sweetness beneath calm skies, nourished by patient sunlight instead of hurried effort. Dionysus became a symbol of gradual fulfillment, showing that the finest fruits matured through steady time. Nothing in the vineyard rushed toward completion. Every cluster followed its own peaceful rhythm beneath the open heavens. When harvest finally arrived, it marked the completion of a full circle rather than an ending. The gathered grapes carried within them the memory of winter's silence, spring's awakening, and summer's gentle warmth. Dionysus represented this complete journey, where every season contributed its own quiet gift before another peaceful cycle began again. Ancient poets often described nature as sharing in the life of the gods. Under Dionysus' care, hills, forests, and vineyards appeared connected by invisible rhythms that returned without fail. Even when branches stood bare or fields seemed empty, nothing was truly lost. Rest itself became part of the sacred order that sustained every future season. The gentle turning of the year invited careful observation rather than constant activity. Shepherds, farmers, and travelers noticed changing winds, softer sunlight, and the slow movement of clouds across familiar valleys. Dionysus belonged to these subtle transformations as much as to celebrations. His presence could be found in the calm passage from one season into the next. Winter evenings carried a different kind of abundance. Families gathered indoors while vineyards rested beyond the village. Stories, songs, and shared memories quietly preserved the spirit of earlier harvests until spring returned. Dionysus remained close through these peaceful traditions, linking the warmth of human companionship with the quiet patience of the sleeping earth outside. In many regions of Greece, vines grew upon rocky hills where survival required resilience more than speed. Their roots reached patiently into narrow spaces, drawing nourishment from hidden depths. This quiet endurance reflected another aspect of Dionysus, whose gifts often emerged gradually through persistence rather than sudden display, honoring the slow strength found within nature itself. Each returning spring reminded the ancient world that endings were rarely permanent. Bare branches became green once more, quiet hills welcomed birds again, and vineyards resumed their gentle work beneath the sun. Dionysus embodied this dependable renewal, offering reassurance through the steady repetition of seasons that had guided generations across countless years. The peaceful cycle of growth and rest continued beyond any single lifetime. Farmers inherited vineyards from those who came before and carefully prepared them for those yet to come. Dionysus belonged equally to past, present, and future harvests, watching over a rhythm that extended far beyond the passing years of individual lives. As daylight slowly faded over the quiet vineyards, the earth settled once more into gentle stillness. The vines stood calmly beneath the evening stars, carrying within them the memory of every completed season and every season yet to arrive. In this unhurried rhythm, Dionysus remained a quiet companion to the resting land, where peaceful endings always carried the first silent promise of renewal.